Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our leadership lunch chat. And today you see two new faces that we normally don't have on Fridays, and there's a good reason for it. So, Jen has a family situation that she was taking care of today. So, we're very fortunate to have her partner Tamera on today from Convergence Coaching. And also, if you tuned in last week, we had Joey Havens on talking about gratitude. And one of the things that Jen and I are going to be presenting at AICPA Engage is all about generous leadership. And we've, really gone through people that we know and kind of assessed traits as far as leadership. And Randy came to mind as part of this part of the model of generous leadership, and that is on growth. So today we're very fortunate to have Randy on with us as a guest. And Randy, do you want to just give a little introduction on yourself before we get started?
Sure. CEO of Hogan Taylor, headquartered in Tulsa, Oklahoma, have offices throughout Oklahoma and Arkansas, and very happy to be a guest today. I've known Tamera for a long, long time. Hogan Taylor would not be what Hogan Taylor is without Tamera Loerzel and Convergence Coaching in a broader sense. So happy to have this discussion today. What a great topic about generous leadership and growth. And so can't wait to dive in with you guys.
Awesome. So Tamera, did you want to get started?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I was so happy, Randy, when Jen said, as she and Amy were looking at who should we invite to this, that, obviously you came top to mind, about generosity. We've talked about that over the years. And specific to the growth aspect, what do you think are some of the attributes that leaders demonstrate around growth that drive generous leadership?
Well, it's interesting that at Hogan Taylor, we talk about growth a lot. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily use the word generosity a lot, but man, they are so tied together. And for us, generosity and growth comes through one of our core values. We only have three of them, and one of them is all about growth. Our word for that, as you know, Tamera, is dynamic. And for us, that means moving forward optimistically, being better tomorrow than we are today. So growth is in our DNA, and growth can't happen unless you have intentional generosity wrapped around that. Even if you don't use the word a lot, like we don't, I bet you could come in to our firm and Tamera, you could do what you taught us about. You can feel culture and you will feel a generosity at Hogan Taylor. At least I hope you do.
Yeah. So as far as melding the two together with generosity and growth, a lot of growth is around learning. And part of a generous culture is giving time for learning. And learning can come in many ways, whether it's through structured CPE, through outside learning to help someone better round out their career, or just the giving of your time from leaders to staff, supervisors, managers to help them grow. So maybe you can give some examples of how you do that at your firm.
Well, so giving time is precious, right, Amy? I mean, either it's a priority and therefore time is given, or it's just a lot of lip service. Right. And of course, in our profession, we love training. We love technical training. We love CPE. As a matter of fact, our filter for the world is training. Like, I can't really buy into something unless you've trained me on it. That's just kind of how we're wired. I don't necessarily like that, but I do know that we're not going anywhere without the opportunity to provide people to expand their minds and their horizons around something that we're promoting. So for us, let me just go back to our core value real quick of being dynamic. One of the pieces of that is micro innovation. So micro innovations are little small, incremental, get better. You don't have to have anybody's approval. You have an idea, implement it. Just go make it happen. Mm-hmm. So within our training, we are freeing people up to, as they are doing their work, thinking about how can I do this better? Where are my pain points? Why am I doing this? And that's a level of training, Amy, that I think is like, that helps growth. And so now I am actually being valued for my contribution. I'm implementing my contribution. And then if it works, we shout it from the rooftop. If it doesn't work, nobody knew you did it anyway. So you're all right. So training is a cultural thing as well, right? Like, training is not just sitting down, listening to an instructor. It is I'm learning all of the time kind of mindset. And I hope we have that at Hogan Taylor.
Well, and I think there's training is knowledge transfer, but then there's skills development and application of it. And what you're pointing to, Randy, is take what you learned and then apply it. And I love the phrase, micro innovation. I know you're all about innovation as part of growth. And what kind of new ideas should we be implementing and considering? And let's try it. Like, there's a really safe place to trust and try it, which is awesome. And so I think one of the questions around that is, you're managing growth and innovation. How do you balance that with capacity planning and priorities?
Well, that's a practice management question for the ages, right? And one of the things that all of us are struggling with right now in the capacity management space is our government, especially to our tax professionals and tax laws, and the pandemic has not been very, very fair to tax professionals. So there's a lot of hurt, right, and a lot of fatigue and a lot of mental anguish going on and stress. But what you have to do is if generosity, if growth is part of what you're all about, for Hogan Taylor, we call it, we'll go to campuses and we'll hire up and we'll hire people before we need them because we assume that we're going to grow. And when we I always call her Susie Q. Okay, there's no Susie Q, but I call her that all the time. When Susie Q is invited into Hogan Taylor, I mean, we are pouring into her right off the bat with soft skills, technical training, a mindset of being an advisor, a mindset of being better, innovative, all of the time. So, Tamera, I just think that all of those things are important for leaders like me to make sure that all of that is reflected in the budget. Like, if we're going to have practice management, we're going to have initiatives around balancing for growth and capacity. Well, is that what your budget looks like? So one of the things, just to be transparent with the audience today, Hogan Taylor was caught a little bit flat at the beginning of the pandemic with this ramping up for a lot of growth in 2020. And we didn't have it, right? So there's a big capacity issue, and what are we going to do with all of that? And that's not our topic today, but it's better to find ourselves in that situation than always putting pressure on people. Like, we're not going to add one more person until you're working 2,000 client hours. We just don't have that philosophy. It's not reflected in our hiring practices. It's not reflected in our budget. And I'm sure you could see that as a seasoned leader.
So with this micro innovation, which I think is a great term and way to really kind of have a mantra in the culture of that, you have that freedom. At the same time, what can happen when people try new things is maybe it doesn't go well and they get branded for something not going well, or they didn't get the right feedback along the way as they needed it, so that they could be successful in something that they were trying new. So how do you go about giving real-time feedback and allowing someone, I hate to use the word fail, but allowing for those mistakes that happen so that you grow and learn and make it better? That's what innovation is. It doesn't always turn out perfect the first time. How do you create that in your culture so people feel free to do the micro innovation?
So Amy, that's a great question, because first of all, there is a pulling down of the old before you can put into the minds the new. And the pulling down of the old has to acknowledge that our very training as CPAs teach us to get to the right answer. and debits always equal credits, and
Right.
perfection is elevated. And you got to tear some of that down, because if you don't allow freedom to try it in a risk-free environment so that it's okay if it doesn't work, you have to build expectations that maybe 1 out of every 10 ideas is going to be okay, but the other 9 are just as important to try to get to the one. And so there's not this pressure, this, bearing down that, oh, I don't want to try that because number one, it might not work. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to be branded. That just can't exist within your culture. And we work hard at allowing our staff, everybody, every single colleague of Hogan Taylor to just try it. Just get after it. Even if it costs a little money, just do it. If it doesn't work, then that's okay. What's best is that you tried, and trying will make us better collectively. So you have to pull down the old before you can insert that new mindset. And accounting firms have got to get away from that. Perfection is king. By the way, it's always been fleeting. It's always been a myth. We've never been perfect. We just convince ourselves and pat ourselves on the back, and but we're not really growing, and we're not making an impact, and we're not creating a lift in our communities that we should be, because we're too conservative and afraid to try and risk averse. You got to help, in an accounting firm in particular, you got to help insert a risk appetite that's acceptable for growth to even happen.
Is there a way you celebrate people that are doing that?
Yes, it's a big part of our innovation to celebrate. Now, I'm not going to say we do this perfect, Amy, but it is within our.
It's good to say, yeah.
It's in our innovation thinking. It's in our change management principles that as new things come on, we celebrate them. Every other week, I do what we call a CEO clip, and in those clips, we'll celebrate great stories, and we'll pass along things. It's amazing what creative people can do to get their work done better that only a few people will find out about. And it's like, wait a minute, you got to tell the whole firm that. And we need to do better about that, Amy, but it is our culture to at least try to celebrate the big wins. Yeah. Or the little wins.
Yes, exactly.
Like all of it.
Yes.
Well, and so as you're driving that and you're creating this safe culture that I can try things, some things aren't going to work, or some things don't necessarily fit, or there's feedback you have to give, or I'm over here worrying about it. I think you've created this culture that we can share that feedback, that we can have open conversations about that. How does that fit? That whole feedback process and the conversation that's required, for that to work.
So at least in my leadership through our structures at Hogan Taylor, I'm all about real time, do it now. If you wait, it's too late, that kind of stuff. I'm more of a 10% review, 90% look forward. Let's get better. Let's focus on our strengths and moving forward. Now, we do have a wonderful career development program. Thank you, Tamera. And it's got some good structure in it that promotes the right kinds of conversations. But even at that can be too bureaucratic if we lose the value of what I really need to do is speak to you right now about what just happened. And that's always in the sense of, hey, tell me why you just did that. Okay, now what can we learn from that to move forward, and how can it be better next time? The whole thought of evaluation and now I'm in trouble and that kind of stuff, it doesn't really work. It doesn't really work for professionals. And so better to communicate, I'm trying to lift you and we're going to get better together. And that's what we value as a firm. So let's have the right kind of conversation.
And I think that getting better together is exactly part of that growth strategy and philosophy. We're going to collaborate to get better and move forward, and real time. I love that.
Yeah. Has to happen that way, Tamera. Has to.
Yep.
Yeah. So with that, in your world of being with other firms that are competitors of yours, of what we like to call coopetition, so you're learning best practices and so forth. How has it helped you to learn what other firms are doing in your own growth and not feel like you're competitors? Or where do you feel there's a line of competition versus a line of growth for all?
Amy, that is a great question. And I love this about our profession. I love that we share lots of information and we're not worried about competition as much as we are interested in helping one another. So I'm a part of a wonderful association of accountants, but I also have a group of 7 other firms. So there's 8 of us. And let me just tell you how that worked during the pandemic. Starting in March, we started meeting together every week, once a week for an hour, the 8 of us. And that's continued to this day. So there's a lot of sharing about how are you handling this and what are you doing? And they have helped me as a leader, which then I get to help Hogan Taylor in its growth and its development. So if a leader, and now I guess I'm talking to the CEOs and managing partners out there, if you are just living in your own world within your firm, you are in big trouble because culture and the world is going to pass you by. You have to broaden your perspective. Leaders are readers. You better read. And you better read not just what I call good books for you, like books like Tamera might write, but you need to read fiction. You need to read. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a leadership principle from a fiction book that I have implemented at the firm, and people think I'm a genius, and I just got it from a book that they're never going to read. So I just take credit for it, right? So that's kind of fun. But we need to read, we need to cooperate, we need to help each other, and every leader needs to have a peer network of friends that their perspective is outside of their firm, so it can help their firm.
I think that's great. I think Broadway plays too, Randy. We often quote Hamilton and
there you go.
grow a garden that you will not see come to fruition. And that fits right into this generous, leadership conversation around growth too. And I know you give back, you and your firm give back, Hogan Taylor gives back to the community also. And I think in our scarce resources, both people and time, how does that fit into, generosity and growth for you?
Yeah, we just decided that in our mission statement to elevate our communities, which means to make a difference, to add value, to lift, that we started the Hogan Taylor Foundation, and the partners started putting their own money in it so that we could give to our communities. We've invited our employees into that now, so everybody at Hogan Taylor can give into the foundation. It's got trustees. We're figuring out how to give. But we also provide all of our colleagues, in addition to our what we call flexible PTO policy, which some people might call it unlimited. We don't use that term, but in addition to we just trust you to take off when you need to take off. We really encourage you to spend 3 days a year, 3 days, like just during the workday, just go and serve one of those not-for-profit or whatever, entities that there are, to give. Like, we believe we're blessed, and what we must do is give and be generous right back. So that's a very practical way, Tamera, that we try to implement that.
So as we are wrapping up this conversation, is there any advice or tidbit that you would give to other practices out there, no matter what the size, around generosity and growth, or something that maybe was a learning from somebody else that you've used yourself as a leader that might be helpful to the people watching?
Amy, it's culture. So I believe my job is about environment and alignment. The environment is the culture in which people come in and have a mission and thrive. And if you're not thriving, it's because you're not focused on the right things yet. So growth has got to be intentional. Generosity is not necessarily natural, so it has to be intentional. Giving and getting better is hard work that's worth it. So for me, without being able to drill down for the next 15 minutes into that question, Amy, I would say, leaders, make sure you're not implementing initiatives. You are changing your culture. It's a culture thing. more than it is a let me do this thing, which is the bright, shiny object today. No, culture.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on today and sharing your experience with everyone listening. And like I said, we'll be using some of this for Engage as well to get your expertise around this. And I want to thank Tamera for subbing in for Jen.
You're welcome. It's glad to be here. Glad to be with you, Randy.
Thank you both very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.